best seasonal job that I've ever had was working at a Christmas tree farm. Oh, I mean, talk about just like Christmas music, happy people. They're coming in to, slaughter some saplings and then put the corpse up in their house. Wow, I've never thought of it that way. All right, maybe it's sort of a grisly tradition we have, especially if you're vegetarian. Huh. Well, I had a fine time at the Christmas tree farm. I worked down the hill, down by the river, which it was down by the river, but not in a van. I worked with Sam. Sam was a very, very old fellow. I think he's passed away since then. But I don't remember how I got hooked up with that job. I think my sister was designing wreaths, my sister Genevieve. And so they would just give her a bunch of boughs and branches, and then she would deck the halls with boughs of holly. Fa la 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 la. Whoa! Breaking out into song. So my sister did that, and I think she was like, "Hey, do you need an extra hand?" And so I spent all winter with my Carhartts on, getting muddy and getting sap, sticky sap all over your hands. And your hands smell really good by the end of the day. It smells like a taxi cab. You know those little tiny pine trees that hang? Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, I worked there with a few other people. I remember one of the fellows' names was Jose, or also known as Joseph. That was his legal name, but he liked to be called Jose. Really super nice guy. I hope he's still doing well. I learned so much from him. A very quiet sort of fellow, but very, very quick-witted. And just kind of always had a small smile on his face. And so when people would come up to you with their tree that they just cut out in the herd, they would get this fresh tree and they'd bring it up, and you would ask them, or Jose would ask them, would you like this shaken? Because we had this homemade contraption that Sam had built, and it was like it had hydraulics everywhere, and did pistons and pulleys and a little bubble making machine when it was on. Okay, it didn't have the bubbles, but still, you put the tree stump on top of there and the whole thing went and it shook the dead pine needles, if there were any, off of the fresh Christmas tree. Now, if someone comes up to you and asks you, shaken? What do you say? Of course, you do the James Bond, quote, yes, not stirred. Now that joke was funny the first 70 times that I heard it the first day. And then after that, I started developing a little tick whenever someone was like, not shake, or I even tried to pose the question differently. Like, would you like me to shake all of the pine needles off? Not using the word shaken. And yet still they'd be like, yes, shaken, not stirred. Now, I really should be gracious because they didn't know that it's an overused joke. As a matter of fact, I would probably say that joke. But it's just that I heard it so many times, and really to no fault of their own, they didn't know that I heard it thousands of times. We even had some tally marks that we'd scratch on the side of the old barn whenever someone would say that. Yeah, we had a lot of tally marks. A lot. Well, this place, though, was very, very nice because I'd say it's probably the best seasonal job that you could ever have, because people really are friendly, as opposed to other seasonal jobs. Let's say you work at a water park. People aren't necessarily having the greatest time when they're standing in lines and for just a few seconds of thrill-inducing slides. Yeah, that's okay. If you work in the service industry, like for, Christmas tree farm is a service industry. What I mean is like the food service industry. People are always grumpy when they walk into a restaurant. I mean, you wouldn't walk into a restaurant if you were full, satisfied, and happy. You just wouldn't. Just the nature of the business is your customers are grumpy and they need to be fed immediately. They're happy when they leave, but not for the majority of the time that they're there waiting for their food. Yeah. However, Christmas tree farming is just the nature of it. People show up and they're happy to give you their money to get this funny little tradition and take it home and put it up in their house. And fresh Christmas trees really do last forever. Growing up, we always had a fresh Christmas tree as opposed to going to like a parking lot somewhere. And you could have it up till February if you'd like, and it'd barely lose any needles as long as you kept it watered. There we go, just kind of plugging. This video brought to you in part by Green River Valley Christmas Tree Farms. Get your Christmas tree today. Ding! All right, where was I? Oh yeah, so what I did was not just work during the winter, but I also worked during the summer because I was such a good worker. And Sam, let me describe Sam to you. He was a very, very skinny sort of fellow. He had a very gaunt face and no beard, although he typically had like a 5 o'clock shadow because, you know, he was a farmer after all. Gotta be tough. And sort of slouched over, skinny, just a skinny guy. You know, those skinny guys. But he was an emotional, crotchety sort of fellow. Well, he was, and he, oh boy, we built a shelter so that we could stand under it during the downpours, and it was a pretty big shelter. I'd say it looked like a barn, but with no walls, if that makes sense. If you've been to Hawaii, then you've seen a barn with no walls. It's just to protect you from the rain. And so we built that, and it was a lot of work. Big posts. I learned a lot about construction just with that little tiny project. So he taught me a lot, and that was great. But let me give you an example of how emotional he could get, which was so funny. I'd be like, "Hey Sam, I think it might be crooked, like the gutter." Now, a gutter is supposed to have a slight slope to it, so of course the water can drain. You don't want it to be completely flat, or else it's just gonna be stagnant in there. But I was like, I think the gutter is like really crooked, like a little too much. Like this is speaking of water slides. And he didn't say, "Oh yeah, maybe it is a little bit." He didn't say, "Yeah, it's supposed to be like that." He didn't even say, "I prefer it that way," which is fine. I was just stating the fact before we screwed this thing in and made it permanent. And he said, "Nah, the ground is crooked. Stop it." He does not make mistakes. No, the earth makes mistakes. His eye isn't off. The earth is off. Yeah, the earth is crooked. And I just kind of shrugged. I was like, okay, all right, I'll go ahead and do it. And I was still polite and respectful. Worked very hard for him. Man, I worked so hard that summer and winter. Wow, I was just exhausted. But that's what I did on the Christmas tree farm. And one last brief story about Sam that I'd like to share with you is a moment when he asked me a question, and I don't recall what the question was. I only remember his response. He said something to the effect of have you ever used a crowbar before? Or just something, I don't know, simple, something related to tools or construction. And I said something like, yeah, I used one once to take apart a pallet. And I remember him looking at me and just shaking his head, kind of tilting it sideways, and he said, "You know, you'd make a great lawyer." I don't think that was supposed to be a compliment. I said, Why is that? He said, you can't just answer a question with yes or no. Oh! Ouch! Oh! So, yeah, if ever you see me failing miserably someday, just shake your head and say, Bo, you should have been a lawyer.